Hey everyone, I want to share a story with you. A story that's been a huge part of my life. And maybe it's something some of you can relate to. I always believed that loyalty was the cornerstone of any relationship. I thought I knew what love was. And I was certain that the woman I married, Isabella, was someone I could trust completely. For years, I lived in this bubble of security, thinking that my marriage was solid, that we were one of the lucky couples who had it all figured out. We had our ups and downs like everyone else, but I never imagined that the very foundation of our relationship could be shaken so deeply. But life has a funny way of testing our beliefs, doesn't it? You think you know someone inside and out, and then one day you're faced with a truth that changes everything. And that's exactly what happened to me. I'll never forget the moment when I first suspected that something was wrong. It was a quiet evening, nothing out of the ordinary, but there was this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, something I couldn't shake. And that's where it all began, the unraveling of the life I thought I knew. What I'm about to share isn't just my story. It's a story that could happen to anyone. It's a story about love, betrayal, and the painful process of rebuilding after your world has been turned upside down. So, if you've ever questioned the trust in your relationship, or if you've ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right, stick around. This is for you. Before everything fell apart, my life with Isabella seemed like a dream come true. We met in the most unexpected way, at a friend's gathering. I remember thinking how lucky I was to find someone like her. She was kind, beautiful, and we clicked instantly. It felt like we were made for each other. We spent countless nights talking about our future, planning the life we wanted to build together. From the very beginning, I trusted Isabella completely. We shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our dreams. There was this deep sense of connection, like we were in sync on every level. I never doubted her loyalty, not even for a second. We were a team, and I was convinced that nothing could come between us. Over the years, we built a life together. We went through the usual ups and downs, just like any couple, but I always believed that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. We had our routines, our inside jokes, and our shared dreams of growing old together. I remember thinking to myself, this is it. This is what it's all about. But looking back now, I realize that I was living in a bubble of trust that I thought was unbreakable. I was so wrapped up in the idea of our perfect life that I ignored the small things, the little signs that something might be off. You know how it is. You convince yourself that everything's fine because you don't want to see the cracks. I used to think that we had something special, something that set us apart from other couples. I believed that Isabella and I had a bond that couldn't be shaken, that we were immune to the problems that seemed to plague so many other relationships. But the truth is, I was blind to the reality that was slowly creeping up on me. Now, I'm not saying that there were huge red flags waving in my face, nothing like that. But there were moments, small ones, that I brushed off as nothing. Maybe it was the way she started coming home, a little later than usual, or how she seemed a bit distant at times. But I always told myself that it was just stress, or that she needed some space. After all, we were solid, right? I convinced myself that everything was okay because I wanted it to be okay. I believed in her, in us, so much that I never allowed myself to think that there could be anything wrong. But that belief, that trust, was exactly what made the truth so devastating when it finally came to light. I'll never forget the day my world came crashing down. It was just an ordinary evening, nothing out of the ordinary. Isabella and I had dinner together, and everything seemed fine. Afterward, she went to take a shower, and I was just sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, not really paying attention to anything. Then, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Now, I'm not the kind of person who snoops around. I've always respected her privacy. But this time, something made me glance over. It was a message, just a simple notification. But for some reason, my gut told me to look closer. And that's when I saw it. A name I didn't recognize. Someone she had never mentioned before. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a work thing, or a friend I hadn't met. But something inside me wouldn't let it go. I hesitated, my hand hovering over her phone, questioning whether I should invade her privacy. But curiosity, or maybe it was that nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, got the better of me. So, I opened the message. What I saw hit me like a ton of bricks. The message was from a man, and it wasn't just a friendly conversation. It was intimate, far too intimate for someone who was supposed to be just a friend. My heart started pounding, and I could feel the blood drain from my face. This couldn't be happening. Not to us. Not to me. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, reading the words over and over, hoping that somehow I was misunderstanding, that there was an innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew. I knew exactly what I was looking at, and it felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. I wish I could tell you that I reacted calmly, that I thought things through before jumping to conclusions, but that's not what happened. Instead, I felt this surge of anger and betrayal, emotions I had never felt so intensely before. It was like everything I had ever believed in was suddenly a lie. Isabella came back into the room, still drying her hair, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't hold it in. I confronted her right then and there, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and desperation. I showed her the message, demanded to know who this man was and why she had been hiding him from me. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she was completely silent. I could see the shock in her eyes, but also something else. Guilt. And that was the moment I knew. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding. She had betrayed me, and the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had trusted with my life, had been lying to me. She tried to explain, to justify what had happened, but all I could hear were excuses. I couldn't listen to it. My mind was racing, replaying every moment of our life together, trying to figure out when things had gone wrong, how I had missed the signs. It was like someone had taken a sledgehammer to everything I held dear, and I was left standing in the ruins, trying to make sense of the chaos. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to scream, to cry, to just walk out and never look back. But another part of me was frozen, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't supposed to be my life. This wasn't supposed to happen to us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at the wall, replaying the discovery over and over in my head. Every detail felt like a knife twisting in my gut. How could she do this to me? How could she betray everything we had built together? It was the worst kind of pain, one that cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. I felt lost, shattered, like everything I had ever believed in had been ripped away in an instant. And the worst part? I had no idea what to do next. After that moment of discovery, it felt like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I was in shock, but the emotions started flooding in. Waves of anger, betrayal, confusion, and an overwhelming sadness that seemed to suffocate me. It was like my mind was racing 1,000 miles an hour, but at the same time, I was completely numb. Isabella tried to explain herself, tried to tell me that it was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, but her words felt hollow. I couldn't even process what she was saying. All I could think about was how everything we had shared, every memory, every moment, now felt tainted. The person I thought I knew so well had suddenly become a stranger. That first night, I couldn't stay in the same house. I grabbed my keys and just left, not even knowing where I was going. I drove around aimlessly, the streets blurring past me as I tried to make sense of what had happened. It felt like I was on autopilot, my body moving, but my mind trapped in this loop of disbelief and pain. Eventually, I pulled over and just sat in the car, staring at the steering wheel, feeling completely lost. I kept replaying everything in my head, every conversation, every time she had been distant, every little thing that now seemed like a clue I had missed. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let this happen? The worst part was the betrayal. It wasn't just that she had been unfaithful. It was the lies, the deceit, the way she had looked me in the eyes every day while keeping this secret from me. It felt like a knife in the back, and I couldn't stop the pain from consuming me. When I finally went back home, the house felt different. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt cold, empty, like all the warmth and love had been sucked out of it. Isabella was there, but I couldn't even look at her. We didn't speak much that night. I just went to the spare room, closed the door, and sat in the darkness, trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't sleep at all that night. My mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about our life together, all the plans we had made, all the dreams we had shared. And now, all of that seemed meaningless. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss, not knowing if I was going to fall or somehow find a way to step back. In the days that followed, I was a mess. I could barely function. Every time I saw Isabella, it was like a fresh wound being opened. I didn't know how to be around her, how to talk to her, or even how to start picking up the pieces. My emotions were all over the place. One moment I was furious, the next I was devastated, and then there were times when I just felt completely numb, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. I couldn't escape the pain, no matter what I did. It was there when I woke up, when I tried to go about my day, and it was there when I lay down at night staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. It was in those moments, in the stillness of the night, that the fear really started to creep in. What if I could never get past this? What if this was it? If my life, my marriage, everything I had worked for was over? I didn't want to believe it, but the doubt was always there, gnawing at the back of my mind. The worst part was feeling completely alone. Even though Isabella was just a few rooms away, it felt like there was a chasm between us that I didn't know how to cross. I didn't know who to turn to, who I could talk to about this, because admitting it out loud made it all too real. And I wasn't ready to face that reality, so I kept it all inside, trying to figure it out on my own, even though it was tearing me apart. And as the days went by, the weight of what had happened started to crush me, making me wonder if I could ever find a way out of this darkness. After that first night, I knew I couldn't avoid the inevitable. We had to talk, really talk, about what had happened. But the thought of confronting Isabella again made my stomach turn. How do you even begin to ask the questions that you're not sure you want the answers to? But I had to know. I couldn't just let it hang in the air, festering. So the next evening, I finally gathered the courage to sit down with her. She was sitting on the couch, looking just as tired and broken as I felt, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down. I needed to understand what had happened, why it had happened, and if there was any truth left between us. I asked her to explain how long it had been going on, who this man was, and most importantly, why. Why did she do it? Wasn't I enough? Didn't she love me any more? The words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't help it. My heart was pounding, and every fiber of my being was bracing for impact. Isabella looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes, and she started to talk. She told me that it had been a mistake, that she had never intended for it to happen, but somehow it did. She said that it wasn't about me, that it was about her, something she was going through, some void she was trying to fill. But hearing that didn't make it any easier. If anything, it made it worse. It wasn't about me. How could it not be about me when I was the one who had been betrayed? I wanted to scream, to make her understand the magnitude of what she had done. But all I could do was sit there, feeling the anger and pain twist inside me like a knife. She admitted that it had been going on for a few months. Months of lies, of sneaking around, of pretending everything was normal. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, but in the deception, in the fact that she had looked me in the eyes every day, knowing what she was hiding. I asked her why she hadn't come to me, why she hadn't talked to me if she was feeling so lost or disconnected. Her answer was that she was afraid of hurting me, afraid of facing the truth herself. But that answer felt like a cop-out, an excuse that didn't justify the pain she had caused. At one point, I couldn't hold back anymore. I asked her point blank, did she love him? Was this man someone she was willing to throw our life away for? She hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a slap in the face. When she finally said no, that it wasn't about love, that it was just a mistake, I didn't know whether to believe her or not. Everything she said felt like it had been rehearsed, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. The conversation went in circles. Every answer led to more questions, and none of it made me feel any better. In fact, the more we talked, the more I realized how deep the damage went. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the trust that had been shattered, the foundation of our marriage that had been cracked beyond repair. By the end of the conversation, I felt drained, defeated. I had gone into it hoping for some clarity, some closure, but all I was left with was more confusion, more pain. I could see that Isabella was hurting too, but it didn't change the fact that she was the one who had caused all of this. As we sat there, in the silence that followed, I realized that this wasn't something that could be fixed with a single conversation. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep, and for the first time, I started to wonder if this was something we could ever come back from. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of everything we had talked about pressed down on me. The confrontation had given me answers, but not the ones I was hoping for. Instead of feeling closer to a resolution, I felt even more lost. The road ahead looked bleak, and I didn't know if I had the strength to walk it. In the days and weeks that followed our confrontation, I started to notice a change in myself, a change that I hadn't expected, but one that seemed inevitable given everything that had happened. My self-esteem, which had always been fairly strong, took a nosedive. It's hard to explain just how much an affair can affect you on a personal level until you've been through it. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore, it was about what that betrayal said about me, or at least what I thought it said. I started questioning everything: my worth, my attractiveness, my abilities as a husband. If Isabella had been unfaithful, what did that say about me? Was I not good enough? Was there something inherently wrong with me that drove her away? These thoughts became a constant undercurrent in my mind, poisoning my perception of myself. I'd look in the mirror and see someone different, someone weaker, someone who had failed to keep his marriage together, failed to be enough for his wife. It was like a dark cloud hanging over me, and no matter what I did, I couldn't shake it. Every day felt like I was carrying this heavy burden of inadequacy, and it was slowly crushing me. Trust, too, became a major issue, not just with Isabella, but with everyone around me. If the person I was closest to could deceive me so completely, who else might be hiding something? It was like a switch had been flipped in my brain. I started doubting people's intentions, questioning their sincerity. Even the smallest things would set me off. An innocent comment from a friend, a look from a colleague, and I'd find myself wondering if there was something more behind it. I hated feeling this way, but I couldn't stop it. The betrayal had seeped into every aspect of my life, making it hard to connect with others, hard to even trust myself. I started second-guessing everything I did, wondering if I was making the right decisions, if I was seeing things clearly. That inner confidence I used to have was gone, replaced by a constant sense of doubt and insecurity. Isabella's betrayal made me feel like I was no longer in control of my own life. I felt like I was constantly on edge, waiting for the next blow to fall. It's like when you touch a hot stove and burn yourself. Afterward, you're cautious, hesitant, because you don't want to get hurt again. That's how I felt, not just with Isabella, but with everyone around me. I tried to put on a brave face, especially at work and around friends, but inside, I was a mess. I started avoiding social situations because I didn't want to deal with the questions or the pitying looks. I didn't want to be the guy who got cheated on, the guy who couldn't keep his marriage together. So I withdrew, isolating myself, thinking that maybe if I could just get through this on my own, I'd come out stronger on the other side. But the truth is, the more I isolated myself, the worse I felt. The doubts grew louder, the insecurities deeper. It was like being stuck in quicksand. The harder I tried to pull myself out, the more I felt myself sinking. The impact on my self-esteem and trust wasn't something I could easily fix. It wasn't like flipping a switch and suddenly feeling better. It was a process, a slow, painful process, and there were days when I honestly didn't know if I'd ever feel like myself again. I started to wonder if this was just the new normal, living with a constant sense of inadequacy, always looking over my shoulder, never fully trusting anyone again. And that's when I realized just how much damage had been done. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the ripple effect it had on my entire life. My sense of self had been shattered, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. Trust, once broken, felt like it could never be repaired. And without trust, without self-worth, what was I left with? I wish I could say that I found a way to rebuild my self-esteem and trust quickly, but that wasn't the case. It took time, more time than I ever expected. And even now, I'm still working on it, still trying to find that sense of security and confidence that was lost in the wake of Isabella's betrayal. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of what had happened began to sink in even deeper. I found myself standing at a crossroads, facing the most difficult decision of my life. Do I stay and try to salvage what's left of my marriage? Or do I walk away and start over? It's the kind of decision you never think you'll have to make until you're right there, staring it in the face. Staying seemed like the obvious choice at first. After all, we had built a life together. There were years of memories, shared experiences, and the kind of connection that doesn't just disappear overnight. Part of me was clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to fix this. Maybe we could go back to the way things were before, or at least something close to it. But another part of me, the part that had been deeply wounded, was screaming that things could never be the same, that too much had been broken. I remember spending countless nights lying awake, going back and forth in my mind. If I stayed, could I ever really forgive her? Could I learn to trust her again? Or would I spend the rest of my life second-guessing everything, looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop? The thought of living like that, in a constant state of doubt and suspicion, terrified me. But the thought of leaving, of giving up on everything we had, was just as frightening. Leaving meant starting over. It meant walking away from the life I had known, from the woman I had loved, and venturing into the unknown. It meant dealing with the pain of separation, the loneliness, and the fear of what comes next. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. In fact, I wasn't sure I was ready for any of it. I thought about what it would mean to stay. Could we rebuild? Could we find a way to move past this, to heal together? I knew it wouldn't be easy. It would take time, effort, and a lot of work from both of us. But was it even possible? Could I really look at Isabella the same way again, knowing what she had done? Then there were the practical considerations. What about our home, our finances, our friends, our families? Everything was so intertwined, so deeply connected, that the thought of untangling it all felt overwhelming. There was a part of me that wanted to take the easy route, to stay simply because it was the path of least resistance. But I knew that staying for the wrong reasons would only lead to more pain down the road. I spoke to a few close friends and family members, hoping they could offer some clarity. Some urged me to stay, to fight for my marriage, to try and work things out. They told me that every relationship has its challenges, and that sometimes love means pushing through the tough times. Others, though, told me that leaving was the only option, that I deserved better than to live with the constant reminder of betrayal. The conflicting advice only made things more confusing. Everyone had their opinion, but at the end of the day, I knew that this was a decision I had to make on my own. No one else could tell me what to do, because no one else was living my life, feeling my pain. I kept trying to imagine what my life would look like on both paths. If I stayed, would I be able to rebuild trust? Would I be able to forgive? Or would the resentment slowly eat away at whatever love was left? If I left, would I find peace? Would I find happiness again? Or would I be haunted by the what-ifs? What if I had stayed? What if we could have made it work? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was no perfect answer. Both choices came with their own set of challenges, their own pain, their own uncertainty, and no matter what I chose, my life was going to be different. There was no going back to the way things were before. In the end, it came down to a simple question. What did I want for myself? Did I want to live in a relationship that would always carry the scars of betrayal? Or did I want to take a chance on finding something new? Something that might bring me the peace and happiness I was desperately searching for? It wasn't an easy decision, and it took a lot of soul-searching to come to terms with it. But ultimately, I knew that I had to choose the path that would allow me to heal, to rebuild my sense of self, and to find a way forward that wasn't defined by the pain of the past. After days of wrestling with my thoughts, I realized that I couldn't go through this alone. The weight of everything that had happened was too much for me to carry by myself. I needed to talk to someone, to get an outside perspective, to hear something other than the constant loop of doubt and confusion playing in my head. The first person I turned to was my best friend, Mark. We've known each other for years, and he's the kind of guy who's always been there for me, through thick and thin. I didn't want to burden him with my problems, but I knew I needed someone I could trust, someone who would listen without judgment. So one evening, I called him up and asked if we could meet. When we sat down together, I didn't even know where to start. How do you tell your best friend that your whole life has been turned upside down? But as soon as I started talking, the words just poured out. I told him everything about the affair, the confrontation, the endless nights of doubt. I laid it all out there, raw and unfiltered. Mark listened, really listened, and when I was done, he didn't rush to give me advice. He just sat there with me for a moment, letting it all sink in. Finally, he said, "Ethan, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I can't imagine how hard it must be. But whatever you decide to do, just know that you don't have to go through it alone." His words were a lifeline. Just knowing that I had someone in my corner, someone who had my back no matter what, made a world of difference. We talked for hours that night, going over the pros and cons, the what-ifs and the unknowns. Mark didn't try to tell me what to do. Instead, he helped me think through my options, reminding me that I had to do what was right for me, not what anyone else thought was best. I also reached out to my sister Sarah. We've always been close, and she's one of the few people who knows me better than I know myself. When I told her what had happened, she was shocked, but she didn't hesitate to offer her support. She told me that she couldn't believe Isabella had done this, and that if it were her, she'd probably walk away without looking back. But even though Sarah was angry on my behalf, she also encouraged me to take my time, to really think about what I wanted. "Don't make any hasty decisions," she said. "You need to give yourself space to heal, to figure out what's going to make you happy in the long run." Talking to Sarah gave me a different perspective. She was more direct, more decisive than Mark, but her advice was rooted in a deep understanding of who I am and what I value. She knew that whatever choice I made, it had to be one that I could live with, one that wouldn't leave me with regrets. I also confided in a few other close friends, and even my parents. Everyone had their own take on the situation, their own advice to offer. Some told me that staying was the right thing to do, that it was worth fighting for my marriage, especially given all the years we'd spent together. Others told me that I deserved better, that I shouldn't settle for a relationship that had been tainted by betrayal. It was hard hearing so many different opinions, especially when I was already feeling so torn. But in a way, it helped me clarify my own thoughts. I realized that while their support was invaluable, the decision ultimately had to come from me. No one else could walk this path for me. I had to figure out what was going to give me peace, what was going to help me move forward, whether that meant staying or leaving. One of the most helpful pieces of advice I got was from an old friend who had been through a similar experience. She told me, "Ethan, you need to do what's right for you, not what's easiest or what others expect. This is your life, your happiness on the line. Don't let anyone else dictate that for you." Those words stuck with me. They reminded me that this decision wasn't just about fixing a broken relationship. It was about finding a way to heal, to regain my sense of self, and to rebuild my life on my own terms. By the end of those conversations, I didn't have all the answers, but I had something just as important: support. I knew that no matter what I decided, I had people who loved me, who would stand by me, and who would help me through whatever came next. And that gave me the strength to start making decisions for myself, to start taking control of my life again. As I continued to wrestle with the decision of whether to stay or leave, the weight of that choice began to take a toll on me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just a matter of deciding what to do, it was the constant, gnawing pain that came with both possibilities. No matter which path I considered, it felt like I was facing a future filled with heartache. The thought of staying with Isabella, trying to rebuild our marriage, brought its own kind of pain. Every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal. I saw the nights she spent with someone else, the lies, the deception, and I couldn't help but wonder, could I ever really forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Or would I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, doubting her every move? Even the idea of trying to move forward together felt like dragging a heavy weight behind me. There were moments when I thought about how much work it would take to repair what had been broken. Hours in therapy, difficult conversations, rebuilding trust from the ground up. And all of that without any guarantee that it would actually work. The thought of putting in all that effort, only to find out that we were still too damaged to make it, was terrifying. I wasn't sure I had the strength to go through all of that, especially with the constant reminder of what had happened hanging over us. But then, there was the alternative: leaving. Walking away from the life we had built together, from the person I had loved for so many years. That brought its own kind of pain, a deep, gut-wrenching sorrow that felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. I couldn't imagine my life without Isabella, without the familiarity of our home, our routines, our shared history. Leaving would mean starting over, and that thought scared me to death. I'd think about the practicalities too, splitting up our lives, dealing with the logistics of separation, the awkward conversations with friends and family, the loneliness that would inevitably follow. It was overwhelming, and it made the idea of leaving seem almost impossible. But the emotional toll was even greater. The thought of closing the door on that chapter of my life felt like ripping out a part of my soul. Every day felt like a pendulum swinging between these two agonizing options. I'd wake up in the morning leaning one way, only to find myself leaning the other by nightfall. One moment, I'd convince myself that we could make it work, that love could conquer this betrayal if we were both committed to healing. But then, I'd be hit by a wave of doubt, questioning whether I could ever truly forgive her, whether staying would mean sacrificing my own happiness and peace of mind. On the other hand, there were moments when leaving seemed like the only way to find peace, to escape the constant reminder of what had happened. But as soon as I started seriously considering it, the fear of being alone, of losing everything we had, would creep in. I didn't want to be alone, and the thought of starting over, of trying to find happiness with someone new, seemed exhausting and unattainable. The pain of indecision was suffocating. It felt like I was trapped in a no-win situation, where either choice would lead to loss and heartache. And the worst part was that I didn't know which pain was the lesser of the two. Staying felt like choosing to live with a constant dull ache, a reminder of the betrayal that would never fully heal. But leaving felt like tearing out my own heart and walking away from everything I had ever known. There were nights when I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had come to this point. How had something that started with so much love and promise ended up in such a dark, painful place? It felt like I was mourning not just the betrayal, but the loss of the life I thought I had, the life I had worked so hard to build. In the end, the decision wasn't just about staying or leaving, it was about choosing which pain I was willing to live with. And that realization made the whole process even harder, because no matter what I chose, I knew I was going to have to face a future that was drastically different from the one I had envisioned. And that future, whether it was with Isabella or without her, was going to come with its own set of challenges and heartbreaks. After what felt like an eternity of wrestling with my emotions and weighing my options, I realized that I couldn't stay in that place of indecision forever. I knew that no matter what I decided, whether to stay with Isabella or to leave, I had to start healing. The pain was too much to carry, and I couldn't let it define the rest of my life. The first step on the road to healing was acknowledging that I needed help. I couldn't do it alone, and I couldn't just bury my feelings and hope they would go away. I reached out to a therapist, someone who could guide me through the process of understanding what had happened and how it had affected me. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I needed to start somewhere. In those early sessions, I started to unpack the pain, the anger, and the deep sense of betrayal that had been eating away at me. It wasn't easy. There were days when I left the therapist's office feeling like I had been through an emotional wringer. But slowly, I began to see that healing wasn't just about moving past the hurt. It was about understanding it, processing it, and finding a way to rebuild myself in the aftermath. One of the hardest parts of the healing process was learning to forgive, not just Isabella, but myself. I had been carrying so much guilt and shame, blaming myself for not seeing the signs, for not being enough. My therapist helped me realize that while I wasn't perfect, the betrayal wasn't my fault. It was a painful truth to accept, but it was necessary for me to start letting go of the self-blame that had been holding me back. As I continued to work through my feelings, I also started to focus on rebuilding my self-esteem. The affair had shattered my confidence, but I knew that I couldn't let it define how I saw myself. I began to invest more time in activities that made me feel good about myself, things I had let slip during the turmoil of the past few months. I started exercising again, picking up old hobbies and spending time with friends who supported me. Reconnecting with myself, with the things that brought me joy, was a crucial part of the healing process. It reminded me that there was more to me than just being a husband, more to my life than the pain I had been through. Little by little, I began to rediscover my own strength, my own worth, independent of what had happened with Isabella. Another important part of my healing was learning to set boundaries. Whether I stayed with Isabella or not, I needed to protect myself, to make sure that I wasn't putting myself back into a situation where I could be hurt again. I started to communicate more clearly about what I needed, about what was and wasn't acceptable moving forward. It wasn't easy, especially when emotions were still so raw, but it was necessary. I needed to rebuild trust, not just with Isabella, but with myself. And that meant being clear about what I would and wouldn't tolerate. There were setbacks, of course. Healing isn't a straight path, and there were days when I felt like I was right back where I started, overwhelmed by the pain and anger. But gradually, those days became fewer and farther between. I began to have more good days than bad, more moments of peace than turmoil. And as I healed, I started to see a future for myself again, a future that wasn't defined by what had happened, but by what I wanted for myself. Whether that future included Isabella or not, I knew that I had to be the one to shape it. I had to take control of my own life, my own happiness, and not let the betrayal dictate who I was or what I could become. The road to healing was long and difficult, but it was also transformative. It taught me that I was stronger than I had ever realized, that I could survive something as devastating as this and come out the other side. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It was about acknowledging the pain, learning from it, and using it to grow into a better, stronger version of myself. In the end, healing wasn't just about moving on. It was about reclaiming my life, my sense of self, and my hope for the future. And while the scars would always be there, they didn't have to define me. They were just a part of my story, not the whole of it. As time went on, and I continued to heal, I started to feel more like myself again. The pain was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. It had dulled to a manageable ache, something I could live with. I wasn't actively looking to start a new relationship. In fact, the idea of opening my heart to someone again still scared me. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I met Mia through mutual friends at a small gathering. It wasn't anything dramatic, no instant sparks or love at first sight. We just started talking, and before I knew it, the conversation flowed easily. There was something about her that felt different though, something refreshing. She was kind, funny, and most importantly, she was real. There were no pretenses, no games, just two people having a genuine conversation. At first, I was hesitant to let myself get too close. The wounds from my past were still there, and I didn't want to rush into anything that I wasn't ready for. But there was something about Mia that made me feel at ease. She wasn't trying to fix me or push me into something I wasn't ready for. She was just there, understanding and patient, letting things unfold naturally. We started spending more time together, and as we did, I began to notice something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could open my heart again, that I could trust someone new without the fear of being hurt. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the old doubts and fears would creep in, but Mia never pressured me. She gave me the space I needed while also showing me that it was okay to feel again, to care for someone without the weight of the past dragging me down. One of the things that stood out most about Mia was her honesty. From the beginning, she was open and upfront about her own life, her own experiences, and that made it easier for me to be open with her. I found myself sharing parts of my story that I hadn't talked about in a long time, and instead of judging or pitying me, she simply listened. She made me feel like I could be myself, with all my flaws and scars, and that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. As our relationship developed, I began to see that the past didn't have to dictate my future. Mia wasn't Isabella, and this wasn't the same relationship. I didn't have to carry the baggage of my previous marriage into this new chapter of my life. With Mia, things felt different, lighter, more hopeful. And while I knew that no relationship comes without risks, I also knew that I couldn't let fear hold me back from something that had the potential to be truly meaningful. In Mia, I found someone who understood where I had been, but also saw where I could go. She wasn't trying to replace what I had lost. Instead, she was helping me build something new, something that was uniquely ours. And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. Meeting Mia didn't erase the past, but it did remind me that life goes on and that love, in whatever form it takes, is always worth the risk. With her, I wasn't just healing. I was growing, moving forward, and rediscovering the parts of myself that I thought had been lost forever. And that, more than anything, gave me hope for the future. As my relationship with Mia grew, I started to realize something that I hadn't thought possible after everything I'd been through. I was beginning to find real happiness again. It didn't happen all at once, and it wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like a slow, steady warmth that gradually spread through my life, melting away the cold, hard edges of the pain I had been carrying for so long. With Mia, everything felt different. It wasn't just about finding love again. It was about rediscovering what love could be and how it could look in this new chapter of my life. With her, I didn't feel the weight of past mistakes or the fear of future ones. There was a sense of ease, of comfort, that allowed me to be myself in a way I hadn't been able to for a long time. One of the most profound things about my relationship with Mia was how she helped me see the world and myself through a new lens. She had this incredible way of focusing on the positives, of finding joy in the little things, and it was contagious. I found myself laughing more, smiling more, and looking forward to the future with a sense of optimism I hadn't felt in years. We started building our own memories together, creating new traditions and experiences that were just ours. Whether it was simple things like cooking dinner together or more adventurous outings, every moment felt meaningful because it was part of something new, something that wasn't tied to the pain of the past. What surprised me most was how naturally everything fell into place. With Mia, there was no need to force anything, no pressure to meet some impossible standard. It was just two people enjoying each other's company, supporting each other, and finding happiness in the shared moments. I realized that this was what love was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not without challenges, but fulfilling in a way that made all the struggles worth it. And it wasn't just about Mia making me happy. It was about us making each other happy. We were building something together, something that was rooted in mutual respect, trust, and genuine care for one another. I found that the more I let go of the fear and the hurt from my past, the more I was able to fully embrace this new relationship and all the potential it held. Of course, the scars from the past didn't just disappear. There were still moments of doubt, still echoes of old wounds that would surface from time to time. But with Mia, I felt like I had a partner who understood those scars, who didn't judge me for them, but instead helped me navigate them with patience and love. As we continued to grow closer, I started to see a future that was bright and hopeful, a future where I could be happy again, not just in spite of what had happened, but because I had chosen to move forward, to embrace the possibility of new love. Mia wasn't a replacement for what I had lost. She was something entirely new, something that I had found when I wasn't even sure I was ready to look, and that, more than anything, filled me with a sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was truly living, and I was doing it with someone who made me excited for each new day. Discovering love again with Mia showed me that happiness was still possible, that it was out there waiting for me all along, and all I had to do was open myself up to it. As I look back on everything that's happened, the heartbreak, the pain, the difficult decisions, I realize just how far I've come. What started as the most devastating experience of my life has led me to a place I never expected to reach, a place of peace, of acceptance, and yes, even happiness. When I first discovered Isabella's betrayal, I thought my world had ended. I couldn't see a way forward, couldn't imagine a life that wasn't defined by that pain. But here I am, having walked through the darkest parts of that journey, and I've emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more in tune with who I am and what I want. Meeting Mia and discovering new love wasn't just about finding someone new to fill a void. It was about rediscovering myself and realizing that my story wasn't over. It was about learning that even after the deepest hurt, there's still room for hope, for joy, and for a future that's brighter than the past. I won't pretend that the scars from my experience with Isabella aren't there. They are, and they always will be, but they no longer define me. Instead, they remind me of what I've overcome, of the strength I didn't know I had, and of the importance of choosing happiness, even when the road to it isn't easy. So, as I close this chapter of my life, I want to leave you with this. No matter what you're going through, no matter how impossible things may seem, there is always a way forward. It may not be easy, and it may not be the path you expected to take, but it's there. And sometimes it leads you to places you never imagined. Places where you can find love, happiness, and a renewed sense of purpose. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I hope that by sharing my story, I've been able to offer some comfort, some hope, and maybe even a little bit of inspiration. Remember, we all have the strength to heal, to move forward, and to create the life we deserve. And with that, I'm closing this chapter, ready to embrace whatever comes next. Before I wrap up, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you who has taken the time to watch this video and hear my story. It hasn't been easy to share, but I hope that in some way it's resonated with you, maybe even helped you if you're going through something similar. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that we're stronger than we think. Life can throw some pretty tough challenges our way, but we have the power to overcome them, to heal, and to find happiness again. And I hope my journey has shown you that it's possible. Now, I'd love to hear from you. If you've ever been through something like this, or if you're dealing with it now, feel free to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can support each other, where we can share our stories and help each other heal. If you found this video helpful or inspiring, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to be sharing more about my journey, as well as tips and advice for navigating the tough times in life. So hit that notification bell to stay updated. Remember, we're all in this together. No matter what you're going through, you don't have to face it alone. There's a community here, and we're here to support each other. So, thank you again for being part of this journey with me. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't forget, there's always hope, and there's always a way forward.